So really excited about this sermon series, Song of Songs. How many of you guys are familiar with this book and what it vaguely is about? I'm gonna let you know, if you need to meet someone to explain to you Song of Songs, the person who probably knows the most about this book is Drew Burnham. I think Drew has this book memorized front to back. I should have consulted him with all of my sermon prep, for sure. But let's go ahead and jump in. There is a group called Barna Research, and in 2016, they conducted a survey between teens and young adults where they gave them 11 statements. And what the people had to do is they had to take those 11 statements and on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being always wrong and 5 being always right, they had to list these 11 statements, or they had to just rank each one according to what they thought. And they compiled that research. Now, 2016 is a great year for us to work off of because they use teens and young adults. So the 15-year-old in 2016 is now a 20-year-old. And the 30-year-old in 2016 is now a 35-year-old. And so that's all the young adult population, front to back. And so on these 11 statements, as they got them to rank, they ended up charting them with the percentage that young adults said they were always or usually wrong. Okay, so these 11 statements, 3 of these statements had to deal with consumption of pornographic material. And this is how they ranked top to bottom. So I'm going to tell you, the percentage is the percent of young adults who said this is always or usually wrong, and then what the statement was. 88% said taking something that doesn't belong to you is always or usually wrong. 75% having a relationship with someone other than a spouse. That means 1 in 4 believe that's okay. 71% saying something that isn't true. 56% not recycling. 55% thinking negatively about someone with a different point of view. 48% overeating. Hashtag Louisiana. 38% significant consumption of electricity or water. 32% wanting something that belongs to someone else. Now I've just read off the top 8 out of 11. That means all that is left is 9, 10, and 11. And not one of the statements on pornographic material has appeared. 32% said viewing pornographic images. 27% reading erotic or pornographic content. 24% watching sexually explicit scenes on TV or in a movie. About 25% of young adults believe it is more wrong to not recycle than to view pornography. In the same demographic, they say that it is more wrong to consume too much water than to view pornographic material. According to the same group, Barna, for the average young adult ages 18 to 35, between 70% on the most conservative estimate and 90% on the most liberal estimate state that they consistently view pornographic material. Of that group, about 20% say they view daily. And that's not a habit that starts whenever you turn 18. Like, oh, I'm a legal adult, I'm gonna go watch porn. That's not what happens, okay? The average age of first exposure to pornographic material in the United States is 11 years old. That's the average age. That means there are a lot more that are younger, and there are some that are a little bit older. I'll tell you, the statistic holds true for me. I was 11 years old the first time that I was presented with pornographic material. And it's not that an 11-year-old is going out seeking those things, okay? Most of the time, it's something that they are exposed to by a friend who has been exposed at an earlier age, and then it becomes something that they go back to because they're interested in. And then it becomes an addiction, and then it takes over your life. We end up eroding how God has designed marriage and intimacy to happen. And that's made evident by the statistic on premarital sex within professing evangelical Christians. By age 22, of professing evangelical Christians, Protestant, 75% say that by age 22, they have had between 1 and 3 sexual partners. Those are people professing to be born again. And it shows you the low standard that we've put on sexual purity within even our own belief system. So to say, at the very least, we are very interested in sex, right? Most people in here, you're like, Song of Songs, he's probably going to talk about sex. I'm showing up tonight, okay? In the entertainment industry, you have the slogan, sex sells, right? and they're not talking about gametes, all right, from my medical people back there. I hear you. No, they're saying if you, some of you guys, like science just went over your head, and I apologize. I saw some confused faces. That's on me. That's on me. But no matter what we have, as far as entertainment we consume, unless it's made specifically for a very, very young age group, there's going to be some semblance of sex or sexuality that is in there. You think about the TV shows that are very, very popular. In the 90s and 2000s, you had Friends. That was like the big one, right? Friends is loaded with sexual innuendo and sexual content. And then if you go into the later part of the early 2000s, you have How I Met Your Mother, which was one of my favorite shows growing up. And all throughout it, Barney and Ted and Robin, they're constantly high-fiving and saying what their sexual exploits are. And it's what our content is revolving around. Now, what culture does is they take things that are kind of taboo to talk about, and the first trick is to make it humorous. And so if you can make people laugh at it, then you can start putting it in a more serious context. And so that's how it really gets into our system. We start watching the sitcoms that have that loaded in, and what it does is it starts to change the way that we view sex. And I'm going to tell you this is our problem. We don't take sex seriously. That's something that we've got to change. Sex is a serious thing. Now, at the same time, let me tell you this. God did not design sex for it to be a job interview. All right? He designed it to be fun and spontaneous and passionate and stimulating, but he designed for it to be that way within the parameters of a monogamous marriage between a man and a woman. That's how God designed it. God is pro-sex. Ben Stewart, who I will reference a lot in this series because he did one before and he just crushed it, he said it this way. God created the equipment we use to play the game with. And I was like, that's a pretty good analogy, using that one, okay? God designed sex. He says that the way that he made this is good. So as we look at this Song of Songs, we're going to see the exemplar of what a godly marriage, a godly romantic relationship should look like, okay? This is not a historical book. This is not based on two actual people that lived. This is Hebrew love poetry. And it's going to use a lot of colorful language, and sometimes it's going to be so colorful that you might blush as well. There are three main speaking parts. You have the woman, who talks a little over half the time. So guys, if you're taking notes, go ahead and write that down for your future. And then you have the guy who speaks about a third of the time, and he doesn't get the rest of the time because her friends also get a say-so in this. Turns out Spice Girls are right all along. If you want to be her lover, you got to get with her friends. And some of you guys are too young to get that, and that's okay. All right? Now, this book is often referred to as the Song of Solomon. And that's because in verse 1, it says Solomon's Song of Songs. But this is about the relationship between two people who are definitely committed to each other. And they only have eyes for that one. Solomon had 700 concubines. I don't know that he necessarily had eyes for just one. And so it is not commonly accepted that Solomon wrote this. It's debated, but the common theory is that it is written in the wisdom tradition of Solomon. And so the appropriate title for it would be Song of Songs. And so what that is a superlative form of that. You know how we sang earlier that we said Jesus, King of Kings, right? Lord of Lords. That means above all. This is the song above all songs. This song makes Thinking Out Loud by Ed Sheeran look like some sort of sappy middle school will you go out with me letter. And we all have experienced those. And they're not good, okay? When you send a letter through someone, you say, hey, ask them to go out with me. Now everybody knows you asked. And whenever you get rejected like I did, now everybody knows about it immediately. It's great. So as we go through this has a lot of passion in it. That's tonight's title. Chapter 1 into the first part of chapter 2 it's a bunch of passion between these two people. Throughout the whole book, they're going to have sex twice throughout the story. It begins with this couple that is courting for the purpose of marriage. They are about to get married. That's key to understand. They don't actually get married until chapter 3, but they are courting for the purpose of marriage. They're working to that end, and then we get to see part of their relationship into the beginnings of their marriage. Now, this book is so filled with some of that colorful language that Hebrew boys were not allowed to read the Song of Songs because they thought that if they read it, it would stir their desire, and their desire would lead to action. And so you had to wait until you were an adult before you could actually read the Song of Songs. It doesn't hold back. This is how the woman starts in verse 2. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. She comes in blazing. First thing that she says is, I want to make out with this guy so hard right now, okay? She is excited. You can just imagine the scene. I'm thinking like he just dropped her off from a date. They're standing on the front porch. She's fumbling with her keys. She could clearly go inside, and the guy's not taking the hint. And he's like, I don't know if I should. And she's like, will you freaking kiss me already, please? I would love to have your mouth on my mouth right now, okay? So she starts off with, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. And then she continues, for your love is more delightful than wine. Pleasing is the fragrance of your perfumes. Your name is like perfume poured out. So she starts with how much she wants to kiss him. And then she relates his love to wine. She says his love is delightful. His love brings more joy than wine. Really, any type of alcoholic beverage, whenever you first drink it, it will have this warming sensation that goes across your body from the fermented parts of that beverage, okay? I've never been drunk in my life, I promise. I'm just telling you what I do know is factual. So, but it causes conversation to become more enjoyable. It causes you to relax, kind of alleviates the stress of the day. And she says that this guy's love does that for her. She says, when I'm with him, whenever I'm around him, he just makes all the trouble and the angst of the day kind of dissipate into the background. She goes on to say that his presence is like perfume. Other translations will say anointing oil. Whenever you first walked in to the building today, you might have smelled the scent of fall. That scent was pumpkin pecan waffle by Bath & Body Works. It is one of my favorites. My wife buys me those candles for us to burn at home. I'm okay with that, okay? I'll let you into that part of my life. But we do that because smell triggers emotion. The olfactory part of the brain is the most keen for memory. Olfactory is sense of smell. For those of the science people who were struggling earlier, okay, just keep up with me. So that's the part of the brain that most stimulates memory and stimulates emotion. Think about whenever you smell fresh cut grass and you immediately think, man, I love spring. Or you smell McDonald's French fries and you go, I love fat. And so you just, like there's those certain things. It just makes your brain think a certain way and have certain memories. And she says that the way this guy smells is more intoxicating than wine could ever hope to be. So guys, go buy you some cologne, put it on. In the words of Brian Fantana, 60% of the time, it works every time, okay? Now, keep in mind, up to this point, there has been no sexual engagement. Whenever she says that she loves him without ever having sex yet, okay? They haven't. And she says, everything about the way that he loves me, that's what makes me feel this way. Sex is not something that develops love, okay? It's an expression of how we should love our spouse. That's something that is saved for that. But having sex with someone does not cause you to have a deeper love for them. That love already has to exist. But she says everything about this man draws her deeper in love with him. But the thing that she says draws her most to him is his name. When she talks about his name, she says his name is like perfume poured out. Regular bathing was not common at this point in time in the world. And so what they would do is they would cover their body with oils or perfumes to cover the stench of their bodily secretions. And so she says that this guy's name makes all the stench of this world go away. She clings to him. She sees the value in him. It's in his name. And it's not like he has some romantic sounding name like Antonio Banderas. If my name was Antonio Banderas, I'd have married Jesse at least a year earlier. But his name is a metaphor for who he is as a person. When someone speaks your name and then the other person they're speaking to is familiar with you, there's a connotation that comes along with who you are. Whenever I hear someone say a name like Matt Cain or Danny Meza or Jonathan McCleskey or Jordan Slack, those are guys that I know that I value, that I see how they live for the Lord. And whenever I'm talking with someone and their name comes up and they say, hey, do you know Matt? I go, man, I love Matt because I genuinely do. There's something about his character that makes me go, I love him as my friend. And what she says here is that this guy's name is known around the community. And he is held into high esteem, that he is trustworthy, that he is good, that he is honorable, he's compassionate and is caring. His character is what draws her to him. Yet, in this poem so far, has she mentioned his appearance or his wealth? Neither one. She is most concerned about who he is. She says how much she desires him. She talks about how well he loves her. And she talks about how good his character is. That's what she's gotten to so far. So, as you see this woman evaluate the man that she's wanting to marry, ladies, I'm going to challenge you. You need to change the way that you evaluate someone for marriage if you're still single in this room. You can't evaluate the guy you're going to marry based on how he looks or based on his pocketbook. Because some of the most handsome, some of the most wealthy men in the world, most of them in that upper echelon of financial status and good-lookedness, they're divorced. Their marriages haven't made it. Because a lot of those guys are full of themselves. Evaluate who you are going to marry, who you're going to invest your time with based on the right things. And look at the patterns of his life. If he is pursuing his job more than anything, and he's 25, and he is just grinding, got to make that money, I'm going to tell you what, that money right now matters more to him than you do. And if he has a body that looks like a Greek god, it's probably because he's going to the gym and he's spending a lot of time in there. And if you start interfering with his image, he's going to drop you. He's not going to drop the weights. A godly man will care about your soul. That's what you need. You need a godly man who's going to care about the sexual boundaries of a relationship because he loves Jesus. He's going to care about how he treats you because he's a son of God. So evaluate your dating habits based on the right characteristics. And so the woman picks back up. She's saying, I love this guy, and he has such great character. And then she gets to this moment where she's just thinking about who he is, and she just gets excited in the moment. And so she says, take me away with you. Let us hurry. Let the king bring me into his chambers. She's not hiding where she wants to go. Okay, she's got a one-track mind here. She's thinking about him, and she says, this is what I want in my life right now. Okay? And the desire that she has to be with this guy is not wrong. That desire is not wrong. They are engaged. They are soon to be married. Okay? It is not wrong for her to have that desire to want to have sex with her soon-to-be future husband. Okay? That's a natural thing. She isn't giving into that desire. She's not going into sin there. But it doesn't mean that she doesn't want those things to happen. God designed sex to be a good thing. She says, I want this good thing in the good parameters that God has called it good. I'm going to tell you this, if you're trying to marry someone who doesn't want to have sex with you, that relationship is going to be really, really trying, okay? Sex is a physically, emotionally, and spiritually intimate act that is supposed to happen. You are designed to want to have sex with your spouse, okay? You are designed that way. If you are going to get married, you are designed to have that desire. And clearly, this woman is ready to marry this man. And she is filled with passion for him. And because she is just kind of overcome with her emotion in this, her friends step in and they're like, hey, girl, cool down a little bit. Let me talk for a second. And they say, we rejoice and delight in you. We will praise your love more than wine. So the friends step in and they affirm the relationship. They say, look, this guy's good for you. This is a good thing. This marriage is going to be a good thing. Let your friends speak into your relationships. That's a big thing that a lot of us miss out on. As a friend, you've got to be bold enough to step up and speak into someone's relationship. If they're in a relationship that is not pursuing God, then you've got to step up and say, hey, this is not what he has planned for you. Why are you settling for less than holiness? That's not what you need. So be willing to listen to your friends. Friends, be willing to step up. If it's not going in the right direction, speak up. And if it is something that needs to be affirmed, that this is pleasing to the Lord, that this relationship is set on the right things, then affirm that too. Don't just talk the negatives. You got to tell them whenever it is the right person, when it's a good fit. Now from there, the woman picks up speaking again. She got her breath. Her friends talk. She's like, okay, I got it from here. She says, how right they are to adore you. She's kind of thinking about what her friend said. You know what? They're right. He's good. But then she starts talking about her own self here. She kind of has a moment of insecurity. She says, dark am I, yet lovely. Daughters of Jerusalem, dark like the tents of Kedar, like the tent curtains of Solomon. Do not stare at me because I am dark, because I am darkened by the sun. My mother's sons were angry with me and made me take care of the vineyard. My own vineyard I had to neglect. Tell me, you whom I love, where you graze your flock and where you rest your sheep at midday, why should I be like a veiled woman beside the flocks of your fields? So this stanza is when she starts kind of revealing how she feels about her own self. She looks at the things about her that her culture would say are not beautiful, that are not appealing to someone who is evaluating someone for a spouse. She says, I'm dark complected. Now, in our day and culture, we go outside and try and get a tan, right? Some of you girls are like, I'm sick of being pasty white. But that's our culture. That is not common. Most of ancient history has said, the darker you are, the uglier you are. That's what culture has said. Because it was a symbol of your social status more than anything. It meant that you were a laborer, you were a field hand, you went outside and you worked all day. You were poor, you didn't bring much into a marriage. That's what she's saying by dark am I. She's saying, please don't look at my exterior. Don't look at the fact that I don't have much money to bring into this thing. Look at me for who I am. Look at me for who I am pursuing to be in God, that He is where I need to be in my focus. Look at me as someone who is trying to follow the Lord with all that I am. See that beauty. Gentlemen, you got to see that beauty in a woman. Ladies, you got to see that beauty in a man. We get real shallow real quick. We are in the beautification society of the past millennium. Okay? It's all about how good do you look. I'm going to tell you, it's not about how good you look. It's about how hard you pursue God. There's a famous proverb most of you probably have heard. It's Proverb 31:30. It says, charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. What that's saying there is that, ladies, there are some charming guys, and that charm is really just to get you on the hook, okay? And eventually, that charm is not going to carry the same weight. And guys, she might look real good right now, but here in about 40, 50 years, she ain't going to look nothing like she looks right now, okay? You got to be ready for that. It says, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Now, this woman fears the Lord. And so does this man. And so they're coming together on good standing. And after she speaks about her insecurities, the woman finally addresses the man. And she says, where are you pasturing your flock? Please tell me. Don't make me be like one of the veiled women. And what she means by that is she was going to go look for him wherever he was pasturing his herds. So we find out that he's a shepherd. So she's not from a wealthy background. He's not from a wealthy background. They're normal, everyday people, just like you and me. You want a story that's a great love story? It's one where it's not a king and a queen or a princess and a prince. It's two regular people trying to seek the Lord and do this thing together. And that's what we get in Song of Songs. And so she says, where are you at? Please don't make me wander around. If I have to wander around, I'm going to have to wear this veil because these guys are not supposed to see me in that culture. And so she's saying, please tell me where you're going to be at so that I can not wear this thing and that you can see me from afar and you know it's me. And that I get to see you. And as soon as I see you see me, I get to see your eyes light up. And it's like this sparkling moment, right? She's saying, please let me have that. And so she's asking, where are you at? And then her friends interject again. And they say, if you do not know, most beautiful of women, follow the tracks of the sheep and graze your young goats by the tents of the shepherds. They say, you should know where he is. Also, he has a herd of animals. So if you don't know, follow the footsteps and you can find him. But what they're saying by that is, go get your man. Go find him. Go see him. And you can see the friends' excitement as they are looking on this relationship. They have joy in what their friend is experiencing. And then finally, we hear from the man. He finally gets to say so. And so we've heard the woman sing praises about him. We've heard her reservations about her own body. And we've seen the friends endorse this relationship. And now we get to hear from the man of how he views his betrothed. He says, I liken you, my darling, to a mare among Pharaoh's chariot horses. Your cheeks are beautiful with earrings, your neck with strings of jewels. We will make you earrings of gold studded with silver. She has said, your love is like wine. Your name is like perfume. And he says, you look like a horse. That's how he opens up. Smooth line, right? But that's not what he means. He doesn't actually mean that she looks like a horse. He is using imagery to convey a thought. Okay, that's something that's going to happen a lot in this book. They don't actually say what they mean. It would help if they did, but they don't. So what he's saying here is that you are like, I would say, like one of Pharaoh's chariot horses. If you saw one of Pharaoh's chariot horses, that thing would be decked out. Pharaoh is not going to let anything that looks less than perfect be attached to his chariot. So whenever he says, you are like one of Pharaoh's chariot horses, he's saying you are strong and you are beautiful and you are elegant. And that horse would have been decked out with all kinds of jewelry. And what he's saying by that is everything about you, every feature that you have looks like an adornment on you. You are so beautiful. You are radiating beauty. You look royal to my eyes. Don't look at how your skin looks. Don't look at how dark you are, because I'm telling you, you are beautiful. And he lets her know. He is immediately attacking her insecurities. She had just sung all of this praise about him, and he could have been a narcissist and started talking about, you're right, girl, I am that good looking. But he doesn't. He hears what she said, and he goes, no, let me tell you who I see you as. Because if you saw yourself through my eyes, you would be amazed at what I'm looking at. His response is kind and endearing, and it's humble and loving. And because of how he responds to her, her desire for him is even stronger now. Ladies like words that affirm them. That's something you got to do as a husband. Affirm your wife, build her up. A lot of people struggle with self-image, and that's guys too, okay? I'm not trying to say that only girls struggle with that, but a lot of women do. And so this guy, he's telling her exactly how he feels about her. He's telling her how he sees her, and he asks her to see that through his eyes. And it gets her to a point where she's so desirable of him. And so this is how she responds. She says, while the king was at his table, meaning while he was talking, my perfume spread its fragrance. My beloved is to me a sachet of myrrh resting between my breasts. My beloved is to me a cluster of henna blossoms from the vineyards of En-Gedi. She listens to his words, and she's so attracted to him because of his sweetness towards her. She appreciates that. And then she returns kind words and calls him king. This is the second time she's called him that. He's a shepherd, but she's saying, no, you're not just some shepherd. You are kingly. I look at you with so much favor. He's called her royalty. She says, if I'm royalty, then so are you. She goes on to elaborate her emotion and perspective towards him. She says that while he was at his table, her perfume spread its fragrance. So just saying that his words were arousing to her in that. She goes on to say that he's like a small sachet of myrrh resting between her breasts. And that has two meanings. One, she is talking about a part of her body that she is okay with the idea of him being close to. Okay, so she's kind of saying like, hey. And then the other part of that is that she is saying that sachet of myrrh would be tucked underneath her garment right here. Okay, if it's resting in this area, there's generally a garb that would cover that area. And so the people around her could probably not smell that fragrance, but that fragrance is going to waft straight up right underneath her nose. And so it's going to be inescapable to her. And she says, your love is like that. I can't get away from it. It's constantly just this sweet smell to me. That's who you are. And she compares him to a cluster of henna blossoms. And she says of En-Gedi. En-Gedi was an oasis on the western shore of the Dead Sea, and that vegetation was rare and extravagant and very expensive. And she is saying that everything about this guy is so special to her. He is so valued. So just like she wanted, or I said she didn't want, she got words of affirmation from him. She returned words of affirmation to him. She says, you're so valuable to me. I love you. Nothing you do goes unnoticed. Ladies, you married ladies in the room, don't let your husband's efforts go unnoticed. Affirm him. Let him see how much you appreciate what he's doing for you, because that's going to fuel a healthy marriage. And so because of how they're interchanging with each other and how this conversation's going, she's telling him that he's like this sweet perfume. He's telling her that she's the most beautiful thing he's ever seen. And the passions start to stir a little bit again. And they have this excited back and forth. And the next few lines, he goes, how beautiful you are, my darling. Oh, how beautiful. Your eyes are doves. And she says, how handsome you are, my beloved. Oh, how charming. Our bed is verdant. She is not being cautious in what she is saying. And then he responds, he says, the beams of our house are cedars, our rafters are firs. This is the part where they're like, I can just see them, they're like face to face, you know, and he's like, you are so beautiful. And she's like, you are so charming. And our bed is verdant. He goes, our house is sturdy. And it's like one of those moments when as a dating couple, you go, okay, I've got to go home right now. See you tomorrow, okay? And as a married couple, there's a trail of clothes that are leading somewhere over towards the bedroom, and there's no question about what's just happened, okay? This is an exciting moment, all right? Now, these guys are not married yet, so they have to go with the option where he's like, hey, I'll see you tomorrow. Talk to you later. Okay. But they're complimenting each other, and it's kind of this fun, exciting time. And then that chapter comes to an end on this high note. But then immediately at the start of the next chapter, this is a song. This is a continuous thing to be sung. All of a sudden, it flips again. So they just were in the middle of this exciting back and forth, and they both know what they want to happen. And then in the middle of that excitement, she has another bout with her self-esteem. And she says, I am a rose of Sharon, a lily of the valleys. Now, what she's not saying there is, look at me, I'm a beautiful flower. Okay? We think about a rose and we think about the beauty of that flower. You think about a lily. Flowers are things that are beautiful. But that's not what she's saying about herself. She says, I am a rose of Sharon. Sharon had a ton of roses. She says, I am a lily of the valleys. She said, you can look out and there are lilies everywhere. So what she's really getting to is she says, how am I special? Look at all of these other flowers out there that you could choose from. Why did you pick me? What is it about me that you even want to love? There are more beautiful lilies out there than what I am. There are lilies that are going to bring you more joy. She's concerned about her own image and what she brings to the table again. And this guy, in a moment of tenderness, he speaks to her so kindly. She says, a lily of the valley, and he says, like a lily among thorns is my darling among the young women. What a smooth line. Man, like the right thing to say at the right time. But she's struggling, and he says, no, you're not one of many flowers. You are like looking out over a barren landscape. And you are the one spring of life that's coming up. You're the only one I could ever notice. You're the only one I could ever hope to pluck from this field. You are my lily. Nobody else's. You are the only thing you're the only woman that I could ever see in that light. He crushes it. Gentlemen, if you start channeling your inner Song of Songs, okay, you're going to have a long, successful marriage, okay? Just letting you know that. I am not that smooth. There are times where Jesse's like, I feel gross. And I'm like, nah, you look good. And that's my A game. But she responds in likeness to him. And she says, like an apple tree among the trees of the forest is my beloved among the young men. The forest that she's talking about would have been mainly cedars and firs. And I don't know if you guys have ever been around a fir forest or a cedar forest. They're not the most beautiful things. They're sturdy. They're good to build out of, but they aren't beautiful. And she says, you are like a fruit tree in the middle of all that. I look at you and I can identify you and I see you from way far off and I know that you are mine. I delight to sit in his shade and his fruit is sweet to my taste. So saying that as that apple tree that he protects her. Let him lead me to the banquet hall and let his banner over me be love. Strengthen me with raisins, refresh me with apples, for I am faint with love. His left arm is under my head and his right arm embraces me. So she returns a compliment to him and then she says, lead me to the banquet hall, which literally translates as the house of wine. She wants him to take her to the place of intoxication of his love. That's what she's saying. She is lightheaded with desire. She equates this feeling to something like a sugar crash. So whenever she says, strengthen me with raisins, strengthen me with apples, for I am lightheaded, she's saying, I need something in my body because this guy is making me weak at my knees and I am vulnerable to whatever passions he might have toward me right now. Somebody give me something to eat because this is getting a little too hot for me. And so she says that she feels so close to him as if their bodies are already pressed together. She says his left arm is under my head. His right arm is around my body. There isn't room for Jesus in this hug, okay? So in the middle of this, she knows, she knows how desperately she is ready to be married to this guy and ready to be intimate with him, but she is aware that she can't fulfill that yet. She has this strong desire, but she can't go there quite yet. And so she changes the direction of her song once again. She's been going in a conversation with the guy, and now she turns back to her friends. And she says, daughters of Jerusalem, I charge you by the gazelles and by the does of the field, do not arouse or awaken love until it so desires. She looks at them and she goes, look, I'm about to get married. And so I'm already struggling where I'm at because I know what's about to happen and I know how desperately I want to be with this guy. So let me tell you, don't awaken it. Don't even let love creep up and wake up from its slumber until you are ready for that. Because sexual passion is real tempting. We're quick to give into it. You look at the stats from earlier. It's inescapable, right? We are consumed with the thought of sex in our culture. And she's saying, don't. Don't give it your attention until you are ready to commit to someone in marriage. Because if you don't, then you're going to experience things that'll leave you with hurt and guilt and shame and the scars of what you go through. She says, don't do that. Don't do that. She begs them not to awaken love too early. And from the beginning of tonight, I wanted you to see that it is a problem that we have in our culture, that we not only awaken love too early, we try to awaken love as soon as we can. We're setting alarm clocks way too early in the AM for love to spring up out of bed. And we don't need to be doing that. We've got to be careful with guarding our hearts and setting ourselves up to pursue a righteous marriage. And most of our peers that don't have the same belief system as Christians, some of you in here tonight might say, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. Why you have to wait to have sex before you get married? Like, why you have to wait on marriage for that to be a good thing? You got to test drive the car before you know if you want to buy it, right? You've heard people say stuff like that? Okay? I'm not making that up. People say things like that and they mean it because we have devalued what sex is. We've lost the sight that this is something that was ordained by God. It was created by God for a specific purpose within specific parameters. They say, the married people in here would probably tell you the same thing, especially the ones who gave in early on with someone who wasn't their spouse or maybe who became their spouse at a later date. We'll talk more about that when we get to chapter 3. But they would probably tell you all the same thing. Don't awaken love too early because you can't erase the memories. You can't unsee the images. And those things, that's baggage that you're going to carry with you into a marriage, and it's going to haunt you. I can tell you that from experience. It will haunt you. It will affect your marriage. That's not something you want to have with you. So don't awaken love until it so desires. But on the opposite side of that, there's wonderful news of God's grace for those of us who have made that mistake. If you're a single in here and you are struggling with that in a current relationship, if you struggled with it in the past, or if you're addicted to pornography, whatever it might be, Jesus didn't tell the woman at the well that you have no hope. He approached her with compassion and gentleness, and he called her to repent, and then he said, go and sin no more. And that's the same thing that he says for the singles in here. If that's something you've struggled with, he says, follow me, trust me, seek after me, go and sin no more. For the marrieds who are just living with the shame of what happened in the past, he says, I remember your sin no more. I've cast it as far as east is from the west. So if you trust in me, that's taken care of. I've covered the shame. You're still going to wrestle with those emotions because that's a consequence of sin, okay? We don't escape the consequences of sin as far as the emotional impact here on this earth, but we can trust that Jesus has paid for all of that guilt, all that shame. And then he tells you, cast that to the side, follow me, go and sin no more. That's his desire for all of us. Sex is a wonderful thing designed by God for his glory and the enjoyment of his people, but we need to learn to treat it again as the holy union of two people before the eyes of God. I equate love and intimacy to that of like a winter fire. There's nothing more that I love in fall than cozying up beside a fireplace, okay? But before you ever get to winter, you've got to go outside, you've got to cut down a tree. You've got to cut it up into manageable sizes. You got to split the wood. You got to sit it over to the side and let it season. It's just got to wait for a period of time. And love is very similar. For you singles in the room, that's where you're at right now. That's where you should be. You're preparing to be a good spouse. But you're in a season of waiting, of preparing your heart, chasing after Christ, and then trusting that one day he'll lead the right person in. Okay? Don't make it happen on your own in a way that's not holy to God. But then for the marrieds and then singles, once you get married, once you get to the point that you need a fire, you take the wood that's already been seasoned and you start with the small pieces. And you light it, and those small ones begin to establish coals. And then as that flame grows, you pile larger logs on, and eventually you have this wonderful, warming fire. And that's how your marriage is supposed to be. That's how relationships are supposed to be. You start small and you build it up until you have something solid to work with. And then as marrieds, once you have a fire going, you don't say fire's good and walk away and forget about it. That fire's going to go out. You've got to nurture that fire. You've got to stoke those coals, stoke those flames, add more wood onto the fire. You've got to care about your spouse. Make sure that they're taken care of, that they're encouraged, that they're affirmed. Those are things that we miss out on. We act like once we get a ring on our finger, everything's done. That relationship just started once you put that thing on. So care about your spouse. In the same way, if we do everything right, then that fire's good. But if you go trying to start a fire somewhere it doesn't belong, you try to move that thing out of a fireplace, you try to start a fire in the middle of your living room wall, you're going to burn a house down. Be careful with your sex life. It's designed for a specific purpose within specific parameters designed by God. And anything outside of that can and will hurt you and destroy you. If you've already been there, turn to Jesus. He says, come and follow me. Go and sin no more. Don't awaken love until the time is right. Prepare your hearts to be a godly spouse, or if you're already a spouse, pray that the Lord would make you more godly every day for the betterment of that person and for his glory. If you do that, you're going to be ready.